No! Go down! Go down! Oh, hey, I'm trying to bid on this defibrillator because I really want it and I have $504 just burning a hole in my pocket. Problem is that the bid is currently at $503.89 and I'm trying not to have it go overboard. Oh, maybe if I talk about video games it'll go down. Dead series are common in the video game industry. I went to a graveyard once and saw like 50 different Nintendo series. It was a crazy experience. Poor sales, lack of ambition or ideas, or just the company throwing the game to the wayside are common reasons as to why game series go forever without a new game. Or, you know, because they hate it. Now, some series I would have liked to see revived have already happened. Revivals are becoming way more commonplace these days. Christ, man, even Half-Life got a prequel in 2020. That series infamously didn't have a single game for almost 13 years. Here's just some series I'd like to see revived. I wanted to go for a fine mix of being possible while also being not obvious. Like dog food. I should just quit on this analogy making business. I'm not gonna say series that's on everyone's mind, but I'm not gonna go crazy with this stuff either. Yeah, no wild ideas, no. Also, take that last paragraph and emphasize the Oops, I didn't mention a series you wanted. Well, boo-boo. That's a you issue. Go make your own possible revivals to series forgotten if you want, because the calendar says me day. Super Smash Bros. Is the biggest crossover series of all time. There is no doubt about it. The clash between gaming all-stars from a wide array of franchises, companies, but not genres, since the closest we have to an FPS fighter in the game is Samus. You may be telling me, Smash isn't a dead series. We got some DLC in 2021. And you're right. It isn't dead, but don't interrupt me next time. Learn some manners. While Smash is the biggest, my favorite is another crossover series, combining not just Legendary's game series, but is the clash between two companies absolutely embedded in pop culture. What was it? It was Illumination and Chef Boyardee. Marvel vs. Capcom is one of my favorite fighting game series ever. The unlikely combination of Capcom All-Stars versus Marvel villains and heroes works so well that this game appeals to video game fans and comic fans alike. I love playing Marvel vs. Capcom with friends because there's always characters some of us recognize, and Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is just straight up one of my favorite fighting games in general. However, Disney doesn't necessarily like the idea of Marvel vs. Capcom existing. They're very finicky with their characters, and especially given the popularity of the MCU in recent years, yeah, it's gonna be way past hard for a new MVC game to exist. The last one was Infinite in 2017, which is the only one in the series I haven't played, and I've heard it's a little tolerable at best. Also, doesn't help that Capcom is pretty lazy and doesn't do much with their more quote-unquote obscure franchises. Infinite was also the last versus Capcom game in general. Even Capcom vs. SNK, Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, and Yokozuna vs. Street Fighter, the horse racing game. Instead of reviving an existing vs. Capcom series, I'm feeling like I'm gonna make a new one. Sega vs. Capcom. It just makes sense. They haven't even made the game yet. It's two video game juggernauts, both with a variety of series under their belts, all with iconic characters and worlds, and Sega is no stranger to fighting games. Yeah, you can pit Joker vs. Ryu, or Sonic vs. Mega Man in Smash Bros. It's not the same. I want that same 3-on-3 action of Marvel vs. Capcom 2 and 3, but with Sega instead of Marvel. I just want this game. Please. Nintendo has so many IPs that they've just abandoned in a locked hot car, it's not even funny. Punch-Out, Chibi Robo, Wave Race, Ken Griffey Jr., I mean, the list just goes on and on and on and on, but one franchise that's probably the biggest punch in the gut to Nintendo fans is FZero. That's the last time I mess with that FZero guy again. About a decade ago, they did reach out to Burnout developers Criterion to ask if they were willing to make a new F-Zero for the Wii U, but they were really busy at the time, so guess what fell through. The reason Nintendo cites as the main reason of not having a new F-Zero game is just the lack of new ideas. So why not have no new ideas? Instead of a new F-Zero, just remaster GX and I'll still buy it for like 40 bucks. I mean, they kinda did something similar with Metroid Prime, a GameCube game remastered on the Switch for $40 redos. What a terrible idea, but there hasn't been a brand new FZero since Climax on the Game Boy Advance. Another completely guttered Nintendo series is Punch-Out! While not as dead as FZero, the last Punch-Out game was all the way back in 2009, and that game is a revival in and of itself. The last game in the series before that was 1994's Super Punch-Out on the SNES. Listen, Punch-Out Wii is pretty good, but it does seem to rely a bit too much on nostalgia. Out of the entire roster, there's only like 2 characters new to the series, and one of them was Donkey Kong. If there ever is a new Punch-Out game, God, please have new characters. Actual new characters at that. It's fine if there's returning characters, it wouldn't be a Punch-Out game without them, but it should be around 60% new, 40% veteran, and I honestly wouldn't mind if it's the opposite either. Also, let's come up with an original title. Every game in the Punch-Out series is either called Punch-Out or Super Punch-Out. And yeah, you can make the distinction of subtitles or whatever, but come on, this is a little egregious. Commander Keem was at a time before id Software was all and more sunshine and rainbows. Keem is basically an E-rated series, being a few early 90s PC platformers. It's incredibly important to the history of id Software, which in turn is one of the most important studios in gaming history. The series timeline goes as follows. In 1990 we got Invasion of the Vorticons, in 1991 there lied Keen Dreams, Goodbye Galaxy, and Aliens Ate My Babysitter, and in 2001 released a Game Boy Color game not developed by id. There was a cancelled Keen game called The Universe's Toast, cancelled due to id's shift of focus to FPS titles, and then the 2019 mobile game that Bethesda is so desperately trying to gaslight you into thinking it never existed. While the announcement of this game is one of the only announcements they didn't pay people to cheer for at E3 2019, I gotta admit, the art style for this looks really damn neat, and I would love to see a platformer in this style. Not a grindy mobile game, a platformer. Bethesda can just totally hand the IP over to Rare, and I'm sure they'll do great things. Commander Keen deserves to be brought back, especially since 2D games have been back in the limelight since forever now. But another series that is more kid-friendly than what the developers usually put out is Bully from Rockstar. Yeah, Bully isn't E-rated, but it wasn't M-rated either, being rated a very pleasant T. This game is, in my opinion, a little more interesting than GTA or Red Dead. Not to say those series don't have their merit, but Bully has a more interesting setting and honestly has more incentive to play through the story than something like GTA. At least for me. The last game in the series was all the way back in 2006 with the aptly named Bully. Ah, and here I was thinking it was, you know, this word looks similar. Yeah, the game never got a sequel, and while development was greenlit over at Rockstar New England, 3 years later it was cancelled. I just hope that once they actually finish GTA 6, they can just work on Bully. Dude, a new Bully game just came out. I can already hear you all groaning. Really? New Super Mario Bros. As a series to bring back? Yeah, I know everyone's saying that, but hear me out here. The last New Super Mario Bros. Game on console was New Super Mario Bros. U, almost 10 years ago. A main excuse for why the series shouldn't come back is that late 2000s to early 2010s Mario fatigue. But really, the time period where we were getting Mario game after Mario game has been gone longer than it existed. A return to 2D Mario would be really cool on the Switch. Yeah, New Super U Deluxe exists, but that's a stupid port that removes any reason to play multiplayer with the inclusion of Toadette. If New Super ever comes back, lose the new. The series isn't new anymore. The first game is closer to being 20 than it is to being 10. I think what NSMB could benefit from is just simply being called Super Mario Bros. Technically, the last NSMB game was just called Super Mario Run, if you'd like to count that as part of the series. Also, I would like to see a more interesting art style. Every new Super Mario Bros. Game looks the same, and while I don't think everything should be redesigned, at least have an art style that's similar enough to the rest of the series while being distinct enough to stand on its own. The last Duke Nukem game to be released was ew. But if re-releases don't count, the last one was Duke Nukem is dead, but it doesn't have to be this way. Gearbox Software currently holds the keys to the Duke Kingdom, but the original developers of the series, 3D Realms, is ultimately owned by the same company as Gearbox, which Gearbox in turn is owned by Randy Pitchford. Because if I could trust anyone with a USB drive full of adult content at a medieval times restaurant, It's not, Randy. 3D Realms even recently made a whole ass game on the same engine as Duke Nukem 3D, which is what the future of the series should be. Duke's prime is for sure long gone. That crude humor hasn't really worked since Duke Nukem 3D's era, but why not bring Duke Nukem back as a retro throwback FPS? Instead of trying to adapt Duke Nukem to a modern audience, make a game that is great for Duke fans. Use the build engine, make it feel straight out of the 90s. That would be great for Duke. Except Randy, who loves a good joke. He owns the Duke Nukem series after all.
I love a good joke. I mean, for f***'s sake, I own the Duke Nukem franchise.
You wanna know the funniest joke ever? Back for Blood. I'm giving up on comedy soon. This game is a spiritual successor to Valve's Left 4 Dead series, done by generally the same team that worked on those games, so it makes it pretty worthy. It's just not the same. Oh look, the guy who's been preaching to us about not wanting to change doesn't want to change. Which is it? I haven't played it since the closed beta a couple years ago, but the writing is pretty subpar, and the writing was something that is pretty important in Left 4 Dead. There is the Anacrusis made by Straight Bombay, led by the main writer of Left 4 Dead, Chet Falasek, but it's in very early access. Will Valve ever bring back Left 4 Dead? No. Listen, it's sad, but Valve hasn't made a new mainline entry in any of their series since like 2012, and Dota doesn't count since Dota 2 was the first Valve Dota game, and I don't think Counter-Strike 2 counts since it's an update. Half-Life and Portal haven't seen a new mainline entry, though with Portal I prefer to keep it that way, and they've left Team Fortress to rot. Can you tell Valve just doesn't care? Those silly Valve boys doing what they do best. Out of all of their series, I just think the most interesting one would be Left 4 Dead. I don't even know what they do for it, I just think it'd be the best one since Half-Life 3 is releasing in the 23rd century, and Portal 2 gives a very conclusive ending to the saga. Then finally, Ken Griffey Jr. presents Major League Baseball. Come on, Nintendo, make it happen. Well, we just have to have wishful thinking on our side before we let our expectations get, too high. After all... Damn, I talked so much that I missed the final bid. God, f***. At least I have $504 burning a hole in my pocket again. And it's just enough to get 90 bottles of Famous Dave's Devil Spit barbecue sauce. I'll never run out of Famous Dave's Devil Spit barbecue sauce again!